Hi, everyone. We have a great session happening, and we're going to have a session with Dwayne Gefferie and with, hold on, and with Maisa and um, with Karlynn. I'm adding her to the webinar. Oh, she's on the webinar. So we're all live. And let's begin. We're talking about chargebacks in the real world. And Dwayne, I'm moving this on to you.
Perfect. Well, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending where you are in the world, of course. And welcome to what we call Chargebacks in the Real World. My name is Dwayne Gefferie. I'm a payment strategist. And as a payment strategist, I work with merchants and payments companies to help them develop winning strategies. A big part of my approach is actually learning from different perspectives, experimenting with new ideas, and turning those insights into actionable strategies that drive real results. Today, I'm excited to share the stage with several industry experts who've been in the trenches fighting chargebacks at a massive scale. Rather than theoretical discussions, you'll hear directly from our practitioners about what actually works, the strategies, the tools that they're using, and the approaches they've tested and refined through real world experience. So let me introduce these three battle-tested experts who deal with chargebacks across completely different industries. First, we have Maisa Breve from VO.com, a hotel booking platform that operates both as a meta search engine as well as a direct booking platform. This creates unique challenges as they operate as a merchant of record and have to deal with chargebacks directly. The second panelist is Karlynn Ferris from Sunbit, a buy now pay later company that finances everything from dental procedures to veterinary care to auto repairs. At Sunbit, Karlynn deals with a fascinating challenge, which is how do you defend chargebacks if customers often don't recognize who Sunbit is on their credit card statement and dispute legitimate charges. And finally, we have Will Plummer from Trust My Travel, who serves as a merchant of record for travel companies and holds customer funds in trust accounts. Will has seen what he calls a friendly fraud epidemic, and especially customers who have experienced buyer's remorse or simply claim, I did not travel, and force merchants to prove they actually did. Well, each of these companies process millions of transactions, but faces completely different chargeback challenges based on their industry and their business model. So let's dive in and learn from their experiences. So as the first topic, I want to learn a little bit more about how each of you have managed to deal with scaling. So Maisa, the first question is for you. As VO.com has grown, when did chargebacks become a major operational concern?
Hey everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, as Dwayne said. As we grew and as we became merchant of record, right? That's when chargebacks became a thing for us. And it never really turned into a concern, but when we became merchant of record, we need to have a healthy chargeback rate. It's not an option. I think all of us here that works in this world knows as merchant of records. It was not optional, and it was mandatory to be in a good standing point with the credit card networking. As the volume grew and we became merchant and we are only looking at scaling, we introduced a few, let's say, tools and partners with a few companies to help us maintaining this at a healthy stage. But it was back in 2021 when we decided to open up for being a merchant and grow even more in the world that it became something for us.
Perfect. Well, I want to jump over to Karlynn then. So Karlynn, let's talk a little bit about the evolution at Sunbit. How has automation changed your chargeback management process over time?
Automation has helped a lot. This is actually the third attempt, I guess, beyond a couple other companies we had to manage chargebacks. I would say in 2021, Sunbit had to make a department to actually handle chargebacks because of our growth. So we are able to basically get trends. We do use Just by entering the information into the portal. We are in the works of actually automating that at a faster rate with some extra technology that, has a cost associated with it. So we haven't quite full scaled to full automation. We're still doing some manually, but it's a lot easier for us to fill in the boxes and push these chargebacks at a faster rate. We have learned that the faster we get the chargebacks in, the better our opportunity is to win them. So I do have a team of 3 that pushes these all day, every day, based on what Just provides us of what's come in. And then we try to almost turn them around same day or 48 hours later.
Perfect. So it's really just a process of, as those chargebacks are coming in, you're utilizing a platform that is pulling them automatically, and then you're able to process them through the platform.
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay, so at Trust My Travel, what really makes me curious is, how are you able to balance between automation and human judgment, right? Like, what is one of those manual processes that you just refuse to automate?
Oh, that's a tough question. If I could automate all of it, I probably would. But the reality is, with the merchants we have, and travel is such a, there's so many verticals within travel. You can't just say, well, travel is all the same thing. Everything works a little bit differently. So we can certainly automate our tracking, the reason codes, etc. We obviously know about our individual merchants and the nature of their business. But it does come down a little bit to sense test. It's also getting the evidence in that actually marries up to make the representments worthwhile and worth doing. And the team has worked tirelessly to do that. So we know each of our merchants, we know their businesses, but we know what we expect, and we will go through and we will check that. So I think that's the one bit at the moment that still for me is manual, because it's so important in actually being effective in winning those representments. And there's no point just submitting it just in the vain hope that you might win, because that isn't happening in the real world today. If you don't submit good enough evidence, the issues will push it back as quick as you like.
Yeah. So you can automate all of that, but you still need that human judgment in the loop to
I think
really
so.
those
Yeah. Maybe AI will help, but at the moment, that's how we're seeing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think especially for travel, and I think also for other categories, we've seen a lot of development happen, especially sort of like post-pandemic. I think maybe, Will, to stay with you then. So have you seen any increases in friendly fraud since the pandemic happened?
The pandemic. I mean, I think the big thing first and foremost is certainly in the UK and Europe. What you saw through the pandemic is, there was active engagement by the card schemes to actually push a consumer to raise a chargeback. There are all sorts of radio adverts going on here about the security of Visa or MasterCard and how you could actually dispute that. And certainly talking amongst, friends who aren't necessarily in the industry, they're like, oh, I didn't know about this. What's it like?
Yeah.
Then you saw, again, US issuers automatically pushing the consumer to raise a chargeback, and they were actually raising it rather than the consumer disputing it. And I think that's gone from there. I think we've now built a kind of environment in which that's almost an expectation. So, I don't feel like getting up and going on that trip I bought today, or it's raining, I'm going to raise a chargeback, because it's easier to phone my bank, who I have a relationship with, who have my money, than it is to email back the tour operator I've booked with, or to phone them up and say, oh, I'm not coming. And I know that you've got a non-refundable kind of policy. But that's what we see so much is people just, it's that sort of buyer's remorse, as you spoke about before, which is, we don't want to go. We know we've got this solution. And, it is getting worse and worse and more imbalanced for the merchant. And I think that's one of the real challenges I see. Fraud is one thing, but there has to be a better way to actually filter out and go with the issuers, with the acquirers, with the schemes, right? How are we actually going to solve actual fraud, and how are we going to work together to trust that what the merchant is providing is actually correct? It's too unfairly weighted, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I've heard that from different sides of the equation, right? It's not just the merchants who are complaining about it, but it's also the acquirers who are working with it. And with all of the rules and regulations that are changing all of the time, it's also costing a lot more. But maybe Maisa, then for you, you're in the same industry as far as travel. Have you seen any of those similar post-COVID patterns, or are you seeing different things?
Oh, well, we only started as a merchant after was end of 2021, so hard to give a comparison, to be fair. But what I do realize is that things just got, let's say, easier or more accessible for the consumers, right? And I think with so much time we had the pandemic, we've learned new things. And I agree with Will, it's much easier for them to just reach out to their card networking and let them know, hey, I don't recognize, rather than reaching out to us uh, and being able to explain why they want to cancel something that is non-refundable just because, right? They don't want anymore. So yeah, for me it's hard to compare, but I do agree with Will in most things, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah, you see it now on on different platforms, hotel booking platforms, where you then see you have different options as far as non-refundable, but also, hey, you can cancel, but we'll still charge you for at least a day, and different strategies that are being used. So I think on both sides, it's about finding the right equilibrium, basically, to really balance it out and say, hey, how do we fight it? Just like how Will mentioned. I think, Karlynn, for you, of course, not being necessarily in travel, but dealing with veterinarians, dealing with dentists, dealing with car repair stores. Um, have you seen any of those trends, or have you seen different trends post COVID that you can point out?
I definitely have seen those trends. I would say our company's luckily grown very big since COVID, so of course my impact has increased. But it is much simpler for the customer to call the bank and dispute the charge if they don't want to wait for the cancellation to come in from one of our merchants. If they feel they want their payment refunded right now, they'll just basically file that chargeback dispute. We'll get a notification, and that's is a solution they're using right now. It's a harder impact for us because then we have contracts that are signed showing the loan is valid. They had 12-month installment loan for this, and that the merchant would have been more than happy to reduce it, but they've already disputed the charge. So the bank is almost in essence taking care of them. And then we have to do about 90 days worth of work on the back end. And we're lucky if we get the money back for the payment they disputed, even if they had some owed after the merchant even adjusted the price.
Yeah, I see it. Well, I think overall it's always fascinating to see how things continue to evolve, right? And as you grow and have much more of that skill, you have to adapt to that as well, and find new processes, not just in automation, but in skill, in having people in the loop as well. Well, I want to dive a little bit more in real world scenarios, as I call them, right? Like the things that you guys are facing every single day. And I think every industry has their unique chargeback challenges. So why don't we dive a little bit deeper into some of those things? Will, I want to start with you again. What does friendly fraud typically look like in the travel industry, or make it even more specific to how you're dealing with it at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's because we work with different verticals within travel. It can be very different. I spoke about buyer's remorse, or someone not wanting to do a trip. We work with a couple of vacation clubs across the Caribbean, and often it's, oh, they got me drunk and I don't remember signing up for this, even though they've signed the contract, and things like that. Um, I think typically it tends to be around, the chargeback is raised around the time of the trip. It tends to be, certainly in the tourist and activity space, because it's that I couldn't be bothered to get out of bed. I didn't want to do it. The weather wasn't good, that side of things. They're incredibly frustrating because customers will not typically engage with you. If you reach out and say you've raised a chargeback, we're merchant of record, so the communication comes from us. So we will always reach out and say, did you know it was for this? Making sure it's not a charge not recognized, and you did buy this trip. but
Mm.
they won't engage. And then when you come to representment, it's very, very hard without having a solid piece of paper that is signed, that you can demonstrate that the customer has read every piece of the terms, that an issuer will accept, that it clearly says it's non-refundable, etc. So often we find terms and conditions aren't clear enough, or we can't see that they were accepted as a reason. When you've got a clear tick box on your site, you've stored all of that data. They're doing everything they can to side with the customer. And if you're unsure, that's my big rant in terms of the lack of balance. But in an industry like travel, unfortunately, customers are allowed to get away with it. And I think the stats I've seen stats of 40%, but I've seen stats of 85% of chargebacks are friendly fraud within travel in some verticals. And that's just ridiculous. And that's unsustainable for merchants, especially with some of the challenges that are coming up with the likes of VAMP and the greater scrutiny around not just actual chargeback, but the fraud signs. And, it only takes for them to say it's fraud, and you as a merchant have been penalized. It doesn't matter whether you win or lose. Now with this change in scheme, it's really tarnishing your business and making it harder. And I think in the previous session, I can't remember who the lady was. I'm sorry, Sarah. No. Anyway, but she was touching on some of that and how costly it is for a business, and it's just a complete disadvantage for the merchant.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even though the rules are changing and it's not as easy just to adapt to those rules changes, right? It doesn't seem to be thought through and really taking the merchants in consideration. What type of impact will this have on their business? And I think it will unfortunately have a lot of downside for a lot of merchants who will have to go under, because the margins also in travel, everybody thinks it's gigantic, but it's absolutely not, right? It's especially if you're a booking platform and you're in between, a big part of it is not even your funds. It's being passed on to the hotel or whoever that you're doing the travel with. So you're only operating on a small part, but you do have all the responsibility and all of the costs that are associated with that. So I think especially in those type of categories, we will definitely have to look at that and continue to work with the schemes and with other providers to see other better solutions for that as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting times ahead, I have to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly to your point. So yeah.
Yeah. So maybe Karlynn, for you then, customer recognition seems to be like also a big challenge for Sunbit. Can you maybe walk us through what happens when a customer doesn't recognize your company name? So what does a scenario like that looks like?
Because we are basically financing like dental treatment or auto or veterinary. They may go to, XYZ dental or ABC dealership to get their work done. And then at the counter, they get the bill and they're offered to Sunbit their finance, their work or treatment. And they sign up for it and they pay a little down payment. And then the rest is put into some sort of installment loan based on the terms they pick. It's all done on, a platform, an iPad they're given or integrated into the actual location software. And then when they get charged that first monthly payment, it'll come through as Sunbit and they'll basically dispute it as fraud. Of course, those fraud ones we talk about are the most difficult because they have no recollection of what Sunbit is. And then we have to, provide the evidence to try to show like we had a contract from this location for dental or for auto. They quickly just go to the fraud code because it's not authorized in their perspective. And they don't recall 30 days ago when they actually got a loan from, us as being the servicer Sunbit.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember like for myself being on the acquiring side, having worked on that, we started processing transactions on behalf of the merchants, but then we would use our own logo on the descriptor, and then people would not recognize those in the beginning. And it wasn't until we actually started saying on behalf of or other things in the description. But then on the other side, a statement could easily cut that off, because if you have too many letters on it, then it still doesn't make any sense. So have you tried any other ways of changing the statement descriptor or collaborating or working with the banks on trying to provide more clarity as to who you're processing on behalf of?
We have added verbiage to the actual charge that indicates the location they went to, but like you said, it can get cut off. The R word comes in first.
Yeah.
Basically, we have done that. We do try to contact customers, like Will said, and see if we can, actually have them cancel their own dispute. Because we're like, hi, we helped you about a month ago at this location. We do show the charge was disputed. Do you remember? It does help some. It's not surmountable or anything, but once in a while we'll try to reach out to the customers and be like, you were there and we did finance this. It's just has a different name.
Yeah.
So we try every method too, to get them to recall, because the fraud codes are the hardest to beat, even with the proof,
Yeah.
because fraud is just such a big situation everywhere in all different ways that a fraud code is harder to beat.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, Maisa, one unique challenge for VO.com, of course, is what happens when a customer disputes a booking, but the hotel claims that they have no reservation record. How do you deal with that?
Well, pretty much all the chargebacks we deal the same way, but basically we do an investigation when there is a claim, mainly for the no record of booking. For us, it's concerning, right? Because it means that the customer paid us, and if there was no record and they were not able to utilize that reservation, it means that they are right in disputing and we have to give that money back. So what we do is that we do an investigation both with the client and also with the hotel. And if indeed by any chance the hotel didn't have the reservation, we just, go ahead. Well, we do ask first the client to please withdraw the chargeback so we can actually refund the customer. It's easier both for us and for the client, right? Or if they don't want to remove it, we just go ahead, we submit evidence. We try to accept, but for us would not be really good to accept. So just to make it quicker for the customer, usually we accept if they are really entitled of, but we would first request actually that they withdraw. Otherwise, yeah, it might take more time depending on the card issuer and so on. But we do that investigation with pretty much all the cases in calling hotel and the client.
Fantastic. So maybe then back to you, Karlynn. Sunbit finances dental, veterinarian, and auto repair. Do you see different chargeback patterns across these verticals?
Absolutely. Dental is definitely our highest chargeback vertical. There's a lot of elements that go into dental. It's also very expensive, typically because treatment is a prolonged process. It may be scheduled to have 3 different treatments in 2 different visits, and they might get part of one and then dispute it, or they didn't agree to that, or they didn't agree what the dentist did. Insurance also comes in there, and customers think insurance does pay more, and they'll be like, my insurance is going to cover it, so I'm disputing it. And they almost seem confused what happened at the dental office with the bill, what part was their responsibility, what they were, insurance was going to cover, how long the treatment plan was for, what procedures the treatment plan was for. So we definitely run into that the most in dental, just due to the complexity of dental. And then, we have it a little bit in automotive service, but generally it's just a one-time service appointment, have multiple things that need fixed, but it's not a prolonged set of visits. So that'll happen in dental.
Okay, so you just really see a difference between the one-off purchases that are then spread out over a number of time versus the first initial appointment, but you have to come back. So it becomes this larger payment, but you still have to be at the dentist office every single time. So you see a difference in the patterns over there.
Yep. And they also have buyer's remorse too. They may sign up for, $15,000 worth of dental work and then only get 4,000 or 5,000 because, at the time it sounded good and then the payments don't look good. So those different things. So there's a lot of different things in that vertical.
Absolutely. Okay, perfect. So, Will, maybe then for you, Trust My Travel processes transactions in the US as well as internationally. You just mentioned that you said you're in the UK, the US, but also other regions and other countries. What are some of the differences that you see in how chargebacks are handled between US customers or issuers, basically, versus international customers and issuers?
Uh, the US tends to be the Wild West a little bit. Obviously, there's a shorter time for them to represent. What we have seen a lot of, and especially around COVID, is issuers actively reaching out to customers saying, "Do you recognize this charge? Do you want to initiate a chargeback?" And it's amazing how that come from them rather than from the customer themselves. Um, they tend US issuers tend to be far more supportive of their customers, far less tolerant of the representment information.
Mm.
The rest of the world tends to be pretty good, but I'd say, I mean, our biggest issue with chargebacks tend to originate from the US, to be quite frank, in terms of customers in different parts. And I think that's because it's pretty much the norm. It's been opened up that way to consumers over there, and the issuers are supporting them in that way. So it's far more prevalent and far harder to contest. I
Yeah.
mean, UK, EU, obviously, fraud is less of a challenge in that you've got 3D Secure. 3D Secure in the US is still a bit of a lottery in terms of how it's applied. So different challenges on that. But yeah, that would be my US would be my big sort of flag, and where we invest most of our energies trying to understand things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it probably won't go away unless they start implementing 3DS, but we see everything from seamless transactions and just other things that are happening that are actually trying to get around 3DS or other types of secure transactions, and especially when you're dealing with high transactional values, as you're dealing with, is actually necessary to have a layer of security on there. But the US just doesn't seem to want to move over to that side and actually play ball. Yeah.
No, and it can often be a point of friction then in actually capturing the transaction. You know,
Yeah.
for a US cardholder, the bank might be enrolled in 3DS, but it might actually not actually be actively utilizing it. And then
Yeah.
you've got to weigh those two sided things up. You want to have your acceptance rate at a certain point. But you obviously also want to protect yourself from that fraud. And
Yeah.
and sort of to Karlynn's point before, what we also find is people are getting smarter. If they say the word fraud and they
Yeah.
get the fraud code, that's kind of golden
Yeah.
in terms of making it harder for a merchant to contest.
So it's actually issuers who are educating their customers on how to respond to those, to those transactions in their.
I'd never say that, Dwayne. I'd never say that. But yes.
No, absolutely. No, I think that's what we're seeing as well, is that in Europe, in UK as well, where chargebacks is not even something that people easily get to, like disputing transactions. Of course, they're trying to handle that, but a lot of the European banks that I've worked with as well don't even have a chargeback portal or a way to do a chargeback. And it's something that maybe in the last couple of years with a lot of the neo challenger banks have implemented into their tools, because they don't want to have customer support. They do want to automate everything as well. They've just been pushing that a little bit, but then still it's 2 or 3 levels deeper before you can actually initiate it, versus what you're saying is that if you have US banks just calling up their customers saying, "Hey, do you even recognize this? Do you want us to initiate a chargeback for you?" That creates a lot of friction and a lot of problems for merchants, especially. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I think that gave me a lot of insights into some of those real life scenarios that you're dealing with. So I want to talk a little bit more about what I call prevention versus defense, right? So those real world life examples really highlight sort of like the complexity that you're dealing with. But now I want to talk a little bit from reactive to proactive, right? I want to focus more on what are some of the tools and the strategies that you have been using that have been the biggest difference in preventing chargebacks before they can even happen, right? We already mentioned a little bit of 3DS, of course, but I definitely want to dive in a little bit deeper and making sure that you're setting yourself up for success and how others who are listening can learn from that. So maybe, Karlynn, I want to start with you. Let's say we shift to technology for a moment, right? What has been the tool that has had the biggest impact for Sunbit when it comes to the chargeback management?
Chargeback management for us, of course, is getting all of that information. We just actually helps us submit their entire application to the to prove the chargeback. They submit the entire customer's process, every page they signed and their signature at the end. And then when they dispute, we will back it up with the actual contract. So that has been helpful for us because it's really hard to say the customer was not involved or didn't know this happened. So having that technology has really helped that we actually are sending over their application when they got the loan and then backing it up with the signature of the payments. We also send them like a payment schedule if they dispute midway. Sometimes it might be like 12 months and they've paid 5 months and then all of a sudden there's a dispute. It helps us also because it shows they were making the payments.
Okay, so you have a platform in place that says whenever they're signing, you're pushing the contract, they're signing that, but you have that information directly, so you don't have to go and chase after those documentations later on. It's something that's already into your platform, so that helps you whenever you want to initiate a chargeback because you can just automate it, pull it, and push it directly into the chargeback process.
Right. It's we are actually linked with they know that customer's application. When the dispute comes in, those documents are already in place in that dispute. And then we just fill it in with the back documents, like what payments have they made. So it does help a lot because it supports the beginning stage and then we back it up of where they are now in the loan.
Yeah, fantastic. So it's connecting all of those dots already and then making sure that it just becomes easier for you whenever you do need that information.
Yeah.
Perfect. So maybe then to Will, what about Trust My Travel? Are you using any game-changing tools to help you automate or to help you just prevent chargebacks as much as possible?
Game changing, I don't know. They certainly have their effect. I think everything is kind of progressing, but in terms of prevention, for us, it's looking at trends and around particular mids. Simple things that people should be doing, like velocity checks, address verification, actually putting that point on there. Bit like Karlynn, we're all about the data collection. So we're actually work with our merchants to make sure that on checkout, they are getting all the data they need. They know, for instance, dates of travel, destination, location of a card holder. So you can marry all of these things up and just, again, it's sense testing. It's a rule-based kind of platform to rule things in and out. And we vary tolerance based on who the sub-merchant is on that. So that has an effect. Again, it comes back a little bit to what I said before. You can put everything on that you want to, but that possibly means that you don't then get any business. You can create such friction, or you can put so many preventions in that you don't get any conversion, especially in some areas. We operate globally, so there are some areas where potentially the rule-based approach would eliminate what is a completely legitimate transaction. So we do that on the front end, and then for us, it's very much about making sure that terms and conditions are picked, signed, something active that actually engages the customer to do things. Obviously, being clear about what we send them in terms of a receipt for that payment, making it clear what to expect on the descriptor. We actually break down, even though we're merchant of record, we actually set up mids per sub-merchant, and then we have a very shortened version of our domain and then the merchant's name, so that hopefully we don't get those charge not recognized. And we've been pretty effective at eliminating that side, touching wood. And then, look, really, for us, it's back to data. It's being able to analyze, it's being able to get on top, knowing when travel is expected, keeping tabs with the sub-merchant of what actually is happening, what's happening with the operation. And then hopefully we have enough that when it comes to actually challenge and represent a chargeback, it's fairly simple. We will ask for additional information from our merchants, but hopefully we have most things to be able to challenge straight away.
So it's not just one tool, it's actually all of those different things combined, centralizing that, and then based off of that, making sure that you have the best possible process, right? It's multiple tools.
Yeah.
That
And I think it just varies so much by industry, but even in travel, which has so many different verticals, it's understanding that. And we like to think that we know what we're talking about. So a tours and activities company looks very different from hotels looks very different from airlines, and the kind of data that we want to see, the kind of preventions we've got in, how long before a booking are people actually paying, sorry, before they travel, how far in advance are they booking? And it's just knowing those trends, setting flags within our system. But yeah, I haven't found something that does everything yet. It's about amalgamating different things and working to understand trends within the sectors.
Yeah, and you see that more, right? Like, especially with software, everything is so modular nowadays. It's like, well, we have an API that exposes it, but what orchestrates all of those things together? That's always the challenge. And I think that's where most companies need to be very technical in that aspect, or at least use platforms that combine those things together. So
Absolutely.
I think that's a good one. Maisa, then maybe then for you, Vio.com is a very technical platform. You skilled, of course, not just in revenue, but also in engineers and developers that you have working on the platform. What have been some of the most effective tools that you've been using when it comes to managing chargebacks?
Well, as Karlynn was saying, Just has been helping us greatly, but we also have other partners, for example, for Forter. Forter is one of them as well. And aside this, two partners, we also have our, human manual work to do. Because we really want to make the experience good for the client. Even those chargebacks that are not legit, we still try to help the client. So as we investigate every single chargeback, even though it's not legit, the customer wants a refund, maybe for a non-refundable booking, change their mind, we still try and get that for them. And if we are able to, well, we inform the customer to withdraw the dispute so we can go ahead and help them. But I think, yeah, Just has been a great help for us because, as Karlynn was saying, we upload things on the portal, we submit evidence, and they, let's say, do the hard work for us. But we've been really streamlining our human process here as well and investigating very deep each transaction to see if we have any different patterns because, yeah, travel, it's quite complicated. When you think you explored everything, something new comes up. And now as well, we are implementing new payment methods such as PayPal, and Klarna. So we are now learning how also to handle chargebacks from those other partners. Yeah, so when we think we learn it all, something new pops for travel. But I would say Just and Forter has been our great partners when it comes to some automations.
Fantastic. Well, even though it wasn't something that was necessarily part of this panel, but I am curious, with all of the hype around AI and agentic payments and agentic commerce, do you see something like AI being a bigger part of your processes in chargeback management in the future, or do you rely more on the partners that you're working with to develop those solutions so that you can utilize them in your process?
I honestly don't think so. AI will be a big cooperation we'll have because we are very customer centered. And again, even though when they are not right, we are still doing everything we can to help them. That's our, goal. So although of course AI is amazing, I think AI cannot have that human touch. So we cannot really think on the other side. So I don't see, I think, yeah, having partners and the human skill is still the most important thing for us, at least as of now. We never know in 6 months, but yeah, as of now, I don't see it.
Yeah. What about you, Will? Do you see AI? You have all these different tools and all these other different things. Do you see AI being a part of the way that you guys are either developing new code, or are you automating that, or using AI in such a way? Do you see that in your future?
Yeah, absolutely. And AI for us is very much about analyzing large amounts of data. We were talking about connecting different systems, but it's being able to put those flags in at scale. And the more we scale, it probably alleviates, that human interaction. I absolutely agree with Maisa in terms of, you need the relationship, but for us, it's about analyzing the data. If we know that a Safari operator that has typically a lead-in time of 6 months and then is doing a lot of business with 2-week leading time. At the moment, yeah, we have those flags from our system that does that. But as it scales and as we add more things and as fraud gets more complex, I think AI becomes crucial. And I think the flip side is with agentic AI, I do question how many cans of worms that is going to open up in terms of the ability to prove that you actually authorize that transaction. And how easy will it be to contest that? Yeah, I never pressed the button, I never did that. There are challenges ahead, but for us, AI gives us hopefully that data analytics at scale, and puts those things in place to then free up the human side to actually deal, as Maisa says, with the relationship and the disputes when they actually happen. So there's a balance of both.
Yeah, it will be interesting. I think I'm probably the only person who's looking forward to see the first AI-related chargeback hitting the platform. Did an agent pay for that, and did the person authorize the agent to do that? And does who's liable then? Is it the agent who's liable? Is it the platform that provides the agent, or is it the actual consumer who enabled the agent to do it, despite not knowing exactly what the agent could do? So that to me, that's just extremely fascinating. But I think, Karlynn, maybe for you also, that you're reaching out to a lot of customers. You're doing a lot of conversations to try to confirm that as well. Have you guys looked into enabling AI, like voice AI or voice AI calls, to then go through that process instead of humans trying to do that? Or is that still something that you see in the future, or don't see that at all happening for you?
Definitely see it in the future. Right now we're working on more like assisting customers with the AI level, instead of, our department is kind of a support department here. So in time, I think AI will come to our department where it maybe can help make the calls out. Right now we're integrating more of the calls in on our inbound level, but I definitely think and know Sunbit will not hold back on AI. I definitely think the human element will remain to manually update accounts and check for wins and losses and things like that. But yeah, I know we'll go there when it's the right time.
Yeah, I think, like, I'm a data scientist myself, so I see a lot of those things in the future. I want to finalize it with a little bit of strategic advice, right? Like for our audience listening, I want to give them a little bit of strategic advice as well. So maybe, Will, let's start with you. What do you think is the most important lesson you've learned from managing chargebacks at scale that others could learn from and that they could utilize in their strategy?
I will just warn you guys, we have 3 minutes left. And I will tell the audience, I saw a lot of questions coming in. We'll reach out to you and answer those questions later. But go ahead, Will.
I'll keep it very brief then, which will be challenging. I think for me, it's all about data. It's about knowing everything through the journey. So the more you can capture at the point of the transaction, the more you can then analyze as the transaction kind of flows through, and then you store to create a kind of an audit and a complete picture, will firstly help you prevent those chargebacks from coming in. But then should they come in, will also put you in really good stead to represent. And I think there are so many tools out there, but it all comes back to the quality of the data that you're actually capturing at that point. So that's my one point that I would really encourage people on.
Perfect. Make sure you have great quality data, because then you can build things on top of that. Fantastic. What about you, Maisa? What's the most important lesson that you've learned about managing chargebacks at scale that you would like to share?
Well, I think we're still learning, we're still growing, and for now, our chargeback levels, I would say it's not too high. We are at a very healthy stage. But yeah, I think I agree with Will. We have to keep it qualitative and have good data, and as well, like we're still learning. Like in travel, we have so different types of chargebacks, and we have to have a good response, I would say, a good case in order to represent those. And yeah, we should not take it for granted. So we have to build very specific individual responses for different cases, at least at VO.com, because they're very there are many scenarios for us. So I think not taking for granted and really deep diving for us has been the benefits and the big challenge.
Perfect. And Karlynn, the last one before we close off, what is your one giveaway, the lesson that you've learned that others should definitely try to implement?
I've actually learned on this panel that I'm in the United States and I am in the forefront of it. So just passing that advice along with my own learning here, and just have your documents ready to back up whatever your product is, because you will need them. You will get chargebacks.
AKA the US is still the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank everybody for sharing their experiences, all your strategies. I really appreciate it. I wish we had some time for some of the Q&A, but like Ronnie mentioned, we'll definitely make sure that we'll follow up with it. We have quite a few questions, so we'll share them, and hopefully in the future we can get together and talk a little bit more about chargebacks and sort of like the strategies that we learned around this. So I want to give it over to Ronnie. Thank you very much for allowing us to share some of our strategies and our insights, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much. We'll end and we're moving on to our next session with Kimberly from WorldPay. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.